66 years since independence. It should have been a day of celebration. Freedom, progress, prosperity, these are the three words which should have been at the top of our mind. Instead, we business journalists have three big worries: an investment collapse, raging inflation, and a rupee collapse. The last, of course, seems to be the biggest ever currency crisis since 1997, according to some people. Welcome everyone to this special Independence Day Realty Debate, State of the Economy and the Nation through the eyes of the real estate industry. And we've got voices from across the country. Mufattraj Munod, Chairman Kalpatru Group, joins us from the Mumbai studio. Irfan Razak, CMD Prestige Group from Bengaluru. T. Chitti Babu, Chairman and CEO Akshaya Private Limited from Chennai. Here with me in the Delhi studio, Pranav Ansal, Executive Director and Vice Chairman, Managing Director, Ansal API, and Naveen Raheja, CMD, Raheja Developers. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining in. Of course, the economic indicators, etc., all the data that we can bring in is looking so dismal. That will come up on your screen. But I'm going to come to you, Mr. Mufattraj, sir, first. What do you think? What is your biggest worry at the moment?
The biggest worry is the perception.
Okay.
The reality may not be that bad as it is being projected to. And when you all time say that it is bad, it is bad, it is bad, even if it is not bad, it becomes bad. And that is the biggest worry. Okay.
So you're saying that the figures, okay, let me read these out and why I think Mr. Mufattraj in his own words has pulled us journalists up who are busy screaming these negative headlines. But if I look at some of the indicators, GDP 5%, decade low is what we are talking about. If you look at the January to March quarter, it's 4.8%. If you look at the IIP figures which just came out yesterday, in fact this week, minus 2.2% for June. May were revised down to minus 2.8%. Larger picture, last 5 years, new investment proposals have collapsed to less than 5,000 billion rupees from a high of 20,000 billion rupees just 5 years ago. The number on stalled ongoing projects has risen from 3,000 billion rupees to 8,000 billion rupees. Fiscal deficit and current account deficits both remain a worry. And of course, we've also spoken about the rupee, which has lost nearly 13% of its value against the dollar. Irfan Razak, would you second Mr. Mufattraj saying that maybe we are making too much out of nothing? These figures aren't as dismal and all hope is not lost yet?
I agree with him entirely. I believe that on ground, things are quite positive, and it's more perception that will cause a scare amongst people, and that will send people into the economy into a larger recession, because people will stop spending if they feel that something is going wrong with the economy. Now, if you take everything, statistics are just numbers, and I believe that it's how you read these numbers. Really speaking, on ground, things are quite positive, they are quite good, activity has been quite good, the type of transactions that are happening are fantastic, and the positive aspect of taking things, even if the rupee has depreciated against the dollar, the exporters are making hay, the NRIs remittances that come in are going to come in larger numbers, because NRIs are going to benefit. Yes, the imports are going to be a little more dearer. At the same time, in any economy, you always have to have a high or a low. They can't be a constant. And I believe this is a period that again is a transition. And this transition keeps happening. And I don't think there's anything for us to panic or worry about or press the danger button.
All right, no pressing of the red button. Pranav Ansal, would you be that confident? You know, when I hear stories of layoffs, I look at headlines which say the worst ever job squeeze. I look at the investment numbers collapsing in the country. I'm not so sure whether there is a turnaround. What I'm worried about is not the numbers per se, but the fact that how are we going to come out of the bottom, if this is the bottom?
See, I think what my friends have said from Bombay and Bengaluru, I think perception is of course a big issue. Business on ground is actually not as bad, at least in the realty sector, as it's made out to be, because land is something which is not manufactured in a factory, and there's a big shortage of housing. So I think that sector is still growing. I won't say it's growing the way it used to grow earlier, but it's still growing. With interest rates being the way they are, and there is still growth happening in the sector, I think that itself is a big indicator that with such high interest rates, and there is no way but interest rates to come down from where they are at the current levels. So once the interest rates start coming down, demand will definitely go further up. So currently, of course, perception is a big issue. Residential market is, I would say, still selling almost the same number of units as we were selling over the last couple of months. Prices are still going up selectively in most of the markets, at least where we are operating, in the NCR region and a lot of the tier 2 towns where we operate. So I think overall it's not as bad, and I would totally agree with my friends that it's more perception and it's more media. It's a lot media, I would say.
It's a lot media. All right. Okay. Now that's beginning to worry me. Mr. Raheja, I hope you're on my side. I mean, I am truly worried. Now, forget the media part, the numbers which I look at the job creation that I'm seeing, and the stories that I'm hearing in terms of every sector laying off people. We're talking about spending holding on right now. Irfan Razak says and Pranav Ansal says transactions aren't falling in residential. But how long will it hold on if things don't improve?
I have been in the market for last 3 decades, let me tell you. These kind of things periodically keep on happening.
Okay.
And just understand one thing. We have 123 crore people, and last 66 years, many of them are still shelterless. There's a huge demand in this sector.
Okay.
So, if small sentiments are created by investors not making quick buck, for some time, it does not mean that the market demand has gone. Demand stays. Demand will be there. Demand will keep on growing. This country will continue growing. We have the largest bank of young people on this planet. They will continue. They will get employment.
Right,
they won't be sitting empty-handed.
Mr. Raheja, we are going back to the consumption theory. We still say that the demographic advantage that we have will continue to keep the economy going at a certain momentum. Chiti Babu, please come in here and tell me, I mean, is that enough? We have almost the largest part of government spending is going not for investment or capital formation, but going in for social schemes, for subsidies. That's a large question. I mean, I understand that there's pent-up demand for real estate and we may be able to ride out better than the other sectors, but truly, you don't worry about the way things are right now?
We have the numbers of various, the big numbers which is threatening and all those. But at the same time, the growth in the population, which has never decreased, it has never come down in our country. The young population which is available in the country, that's still continuing. The shortage of housing in this country, that's still continuing. Unless the demand is reduced, we need not worry about the supply. Here the demand continues. The demand of housing or demand of commercial spaces, demand of retail spaces, all sectors are growing. The cost of land, the raw material, the cost of land has never come down. The growing prices of raw material and also the increased labor cost which is coming in is not allowing this price bank to come down.
Okay.
As long as the demand continues and the shortage of supply which is coming in, I don't think we have a problem in this specifically real estate industry, because
okay, fair enough.
Nearly about 180.
Chiti Babu, what I'm hearing is everybody is seems to be on the same page when it comes to the real estate sector. We are not facing any big crisis right now. Let's not look at the top numbers. There's so much pent-up demand that, we are in a sweet spot. Anuj Puri, is it that sweet a spot?
I think, Manisha, I'll take it up from where Mr. Razak left. I think, he made a very valid point to say is that given the challenges that we are facing in the economy today, some part of it is perception, some part of it is in actual practice. And clearly, the actual practice is getting reflected in the GDP growth. You're seeing that in the manufacturing, you're seeing that in services sector. It is bound to come into the real estate sector. I don't think we can be oblivious to the fact that real estate sector is going to be completely secluded and it will not have any impact of the degrowth that we've had in the economy. I think if you were to look at specific to the housing sector, apartments which are below 50 lakh rupees, in my opinion, have had no impact at all, because the sales there continue to be very strong. There is a very good demand. What Chiri Babu has said is, what Pranav has said is exactly correct, that there is a lot of growth, there is a lot of demand. But I would say there are two sectors where I am seeing the impact being felt. One is clearly in the luxury segment. And particularly I'll make reference to some of the larger markets in Bombay or in Delhi, where we've seen the supply which has come out into the market on the luxury sector is far greater than what the demand is. And we're seeing that growth having got impacted in a big way, because the demand hasn't come up to the level that was expected. That's one sector that has clearly got impacted. And the second is that there are certain micro markets within many of the cities, and I'll take example is Calcutta in Rajarat. There is a huge amount of oversupply that has got built up in there, and we're not seeing the rates go up as what was predicted earlier. Similarly, in many of the other cities, there are certain micro markets where there is an excess supply that has got created. So those are the two exceptions that you're going to find in the luxury segment, where people have got caught out because there's a lot of supply that got built up, thinking that the demand was going to follow, which did not come up there. And the second is, in many of the cities, certain micro markets have got oversupplied, and that's where the cause of concern is coming in.
Mr. Mufattraj, you said that there's a lot of negative perception, and perception is the biggest problem. If you're looking at affordable or at least housing which everyone can afford to buy, there shouldn't be anything to worry about. Sir, play out the entire scenario for me and tell me that are we ruling out any kind of a cyclical downturn for real estate? Are we ruling out are we going to negate the fact that a lot of key micro markets now transactions have slowed down, irrespective of what the industry might say, sir? Sales have slowed down. Mumbai market, especially many of the markets, have slowed down to dangerous levels of one flat taking almost more than 2 years to get sold.
No, when I said this perception issue, I don't say that there are no issues in the industry or as an economy as a whole. There is definitely a effect on the economy, and there are a lot of issues which is at a government level should have been handled and which has not been handled. And because of this,
what are those,
there is a
some
lot
of the big issues?
The basic issue is that there are inactions. There are a lot of whole countries feeling that there are inactions in the economy. What are the actions which is required to be taken, which has not been taken, and which is in general a perception, and any general recession definitely affects any industry.
You mentioned one big point, in which I think is a bigger concern, and I don't think media is playing that one up too much: inaction by the current government. Now look at just a little bit of history, which I will set perspective with, and of course come back to my panel. Now just look at when the Finance Minister Chidambaram took charge of the ministry for the second time in 2004. India was in the early stages of an economic boom that had no parallels in its history. Economy was expanding at an average rate of 8.9% in 5 years. The fact that the global economy was also expanding really helped, but what was perhaps of greater importance was the economic reforms pushed through by the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government at a time when economic growth had fallen to as low as 3.8%. That's what the government before UPA managed to do, take it up from 3.8%, which of course the UPA government rode to 8.9%. The first Manmohan Singh government rode that wave. Strong tax collections helped, and of course the fiscal deficit was also brought down. Now the situation is extremely difficult. This is what I'm talking about. From 8.9%, Pranav Ansal, we managed to bring it down to just a tad below 5% if you look at the quarterly GDP figures.
Sure. See, definitely the economy has slowed down, and the figures say it, but of course, if you look at the size of the pie of what it was in 2004 and what it is 2013, so obviously in actual terms it's still grown. But the bigger point that you're talking about is the inaction of the government and generally policy paralysis, which has been talked about very openly.
Which the industry is talking about time and again.
Yeah.
So
I would like to mention 2 points on that. That is a very, very big point of concern for every developer, and I think for every industry or anything which requires government approvals. Every year we try to simplify the process, and we have been asking for industry status for the last 25 years. Being the second largest employer in the country and 250 industries being linked to us approximately, we have no status. We have every project every year requires 1 or 2 more approvals, and the government just doesn't take decisions. There is no timeline on them that they have to give approval within 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, nothing. And if a project gets delayed by a developer because of lack of government approvals, all the flack is thrown on the developers. Courts are totally anti-developers. So I think we are also facing, as a industry, as a group, we are facing major problems of, one is perception, and one is we are being made the bad boys for the inefficiency and the policy paralysis of the government.
Okay, so policy paralysis, and it's not just the real estate sector. There are large infrastructure companies which have, after bagging projects from the government, said, guess what, we don't want to do them. We are out of it. So give me a larger picture, Naveen, Raheja. It's not just today, it's not about just real estate. Yes, we are facing a problem, but the entire industry...
I will admit on one point that yes, we are facing problem when it comes to over-regulation of the sector. Over-regulation, indecisiveness, confusion, and one department talks about something else, the other department talks about something else, and there's nobody else to make a reconciliation whether we have to go by the regulation of the environment or we have to go by the regulation of the fire department.
We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about the red tape, the harassment, delays, which are endemic even after 66 years of independence. Why is it that our policymakers and politicians have been unable to build an accountable framework for either approvals or delivery of services? Let's come back and explore that in our State of the Nation debate through the eyes of the real estate industry. India desperately needs new roads, power plants, schools, hospitals, irrigation networks, water supply systems, rural cold chains, and the list goes on. What will all these do? Well, they will help support income growth on a sustainable basis in the long run. But if you look at the government budgets, these are now used to fund schemes that offer immediate benefits to specific groups rather than help build economic strength over the decades. Irfan Razak, I'm going to come to you. Your city, great real estate case study. In fact, we keep saying on this show, that city has the finest developers, the benchmarks are forever getting raised, the best supply in terms of construction quality, all of that going for it. But the infrastructure is simply not keeping pace. It's going to hurt you at some point of time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually a fact. We as private developers can create the environment, probably the living spaces, work spaces, and maybe the entire atmosphere within our properties. But once you get out, I always say you get out into the big bad world. Unfortunately, the government has failed miserably in terms of providing infrastructure. The city has such a big brand name for IT, and there's so much of industry, so many multinationals are working through this city, a huge amount of export is done through this city. But the fact is, in spite of whatever that is happening on ground, the infrastructure is just not keeping pace. The metro, which was supposed to be ready by now, even is just one small leg is ready. The rest of it is still going to probably take another 5 to 7 years. Traffic is just growing in our streets. They're potholed roads, and public transport is completely miserable. Now, in this scenario, it will limit the growth of a city. You also have issues of water, you have issues of power, and this is what needs to be addressed, and an immediate fix needs to be done. And somebody has to seriously look at all these issues and set them right, or we are going to get gridlocked very soon.
All right. And Mr. Razak, I'm just going to cite some pointers and figures. I like figures simply because they tell you a story. Now look at the current UPA government. It spent 9.12 trillion rupees on various subsidies in the 9 years that they've been in power. The flagship Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, which has seen a cumulative spending of 1.66 trillion rupees. Now the scheme aims to help the rural poor and has proved to be a useful income support mechanism for poor families. But, and this is a big but, they are supposed to be actually getting paid to create some lasting capital asset, which has just not happened. Chiti Babu, a lot of businesses, in fact, decided not to be in Bengaluru and come to Chennai because 2 years ago, the Chennai story looked, at least infrastructure-wise, a little better. But again, the story there is seeming to have a lot of gaps.
See, I agree that in that way, our state, Tamil Nadu, is definitely performing parallelly growing infrastructure. It is not that infrastructure is in advance while comparing to other states. We also have all these issues. But I think our government has woken up a little early, and wherever there is a growth, the infrastructure has parallelly grown. But as you rightly said, that is the one good reason for today most of the developers across the country, any good brands which is developing in various cities are definitely present in Tamil Nadu. But we also have issues. We have the issues of we keep asking for the single window clearances, approval, time taken, and putting up a project, it takes at least about a year to 1.5 years. These kind of issues are there in the real estate industry. But one good thing happening in this particular part of the country is good employment. It depends upon the industrial growth. It not depends only on the IT growth. It depends upon the multi-industrial kind of textile, leather industries, automobile, telecom. You name anybody, any name in any sector of these industries, everybody find a place in this part of the state.
Okay. Anuj Puri, you look at the level of investments in industry and the way they've gone down. Just every sector, people are thinking 10 times before committing to any monies. You really think that the job creation in the coming 5 years is likely to keep pace with what the economy and this country needs?
So Manisha, it is true that the economy has had a pretty severe impact on the commercial side of the real estate. We've seen the absorption go down. It went down from 2011 into 2012. So 2011, the absorption was about 35 million square feet. 2012, it went down to about 27 million square feet, and we're looking at about 23 or 24 million square feet in 2013 as the absorption. So, clearly we've seen the commercial activity over the last sort of 24 months come down. That is a reflection of the job market, getting pretty tighter, the corporates not expanding, not investing, and, automatically that has a larger impact on the overall economy. I would just want to make 2 or 3, points here, Manisha. The first point is clearly on that infrastructure, and if you were to expand that infrastructure activity and say is that if this money was to be put into infrastructure and there were better roads, more connecting to the surroundings and the outskirts of the city, you would have seen a drop in the land prices. Even today, we're not seeing the drop in the land prices. Your GDP levels have come down. Prices have come down, at least in the commercial sector, if not on the residential. But we're not seeing any degrowth in the land prices because there is no infrastructure in the cities. And if infrastructure is not going to be put in the cities, there are no large land parcels that are going to get opened. So we may continue to have these debates, but because the land prices will continue to stack up very high given lack of infrastructure, you're not going to see a huge drop on the residential price.
I would agree with you, Anuj. I mean, everything that you say just clicks into place. Mr. Mufattraj, you did say that ultimately, yes, if the economy doesn't pick up, investment climate doesn't pick up, you will see the effects coming on the real estate sector as well. There may be no room to decrease prices, sir, but what will you do this season? I mean, what will developers then end up doing this season if demand actually takes a big hit?
What is important for the country is how we can make the housing affordable. And the 3 factors of which are important for making house affordable. One is the availability of the land, and availability can only happen, as Anuj said, by enlarging the infrastructure And as you enlarge the infrastructure, the more land becomes available, and that's how the 50% component is in the housing is at least 50% is the land, and that can come down. The delay in approvals, the cost of delay, I'm not talking of the cost of getting approval, but I'm talking of the cost of delay because of the approval is at least 15 to 20% in the project cost.
Okay.
Whatever the state approvals are there, and on the top of it the central approval, which is and no approval has gotten limited any time. There is no commitment on there any time that they will clear in 1 year's time, 2 years' time, 6 months' time, and unlimited. Absolutely. They can put all the laws and shackles on the real estate, that you have to deliver the flats to the people by this date, and if you don't deliver, you will be behind the bars. But there is no commitment from the approval authority that yes, they will clear my plans in 30 days' time, they will clear my this permission within this day's time. Environment. I mean, I really sometimes wonder, that the environmental permission which is required for each building. It's a funny situation when the whole city plan, the development plan has been approved by the environment. What more they need for individual building? And if they need any conditions to be fulfilled, then let it be implemented by the local authority.
Absolutely.
You can't create a municipal corporation of Greater India and getting all the permissions of the all India building, which can take 1 year, 2 years and 3 years. Absolutely. Bombay takes 2 years time to get the environmental permission. And that costs at least 20-25% of the project cost. And unless all these are not added, the affordability of housing will never come. As regards the market conditions, what you asked me question, as regards the market conditions, yes, market, if the demand will not be there for any reason, though the basic demand is there. But there's a perception, whether people would like to buy or not to buy. And that will have an impact on the market, depend on what is the surplus availability in the particular area and the holding capacity of the developer.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to, Mr. Mufattaraj, take up on that point that you just mentioned. How do you make housing more affordable? And look at this. Now, the government hasn't been able to make a dent on any supply side of land or infrastructure. In fact, now this seems to be a knee-jerk reaction. Just try and get the rupee at least sentimentally up. FDI and real estate, we are hearing that the ministry has actually now decided to bring down the norms or ease out the norms. At present, up to 100% FDI is allowed in the real estate sector through automatic route. Of course, this is subject to fulfillment of certain criteria. Housing plots project must have at least 10 hectares. Group housing projects are eligible for FDI if the total built-up area is at least 50,000 square meters. Government has proposed easier guidelines now for allowing 100% FDI and reduce minimum carpet area to be built in FDI-linked real estate projects to 20,000 square meters from its earlier requirement of 50,000 square meters. Naveen, Raheja, the ministry, what we've heard is hoping that will actually attract not only FDI but FDI into affordable housing. Is that how do you get affordable housing in the country, by such knee-jerk reactions?
No, the main thing is, the supply side. We have to, unless we don't get clearances, what will FDI do?
Will FDI come in? I mean, look at the state of the way real estate is. I mean, margins are at an all-time thin. It's difficult to get money from the system. How will you get FDI? Just by easing those norms? Do you expect FDI to pick up?
No, it can't happen like that. If you give more money, naturally the money is not for free. You have to pay for it. You may get it from any source, whether you get locally or you get from international sources.
So do you consider, Pranav Ansal, that this is a knee-jerk reaction? The main thing is
you have to create an atmosphere. You have to create a setup where we can work. Okay. Please allow us to work.
All right. But just take this, FDI initiatives which we are hearing have gone out from the ministry. Do you think they will help?
See,
at least there is that cash strappedness that one feels in the industry. Money is not easy to come by.
See, I think anybody who invests in FDI, and we've had 1 or 2 FDIs invest in our company, they will not invest for such, it's not the size of the project that matters. If they like a project, if they see there is a return, they will go for it. So I think this is totally a knee-jerk reaction just to create positive sentiment for the falling rupee. But And this definitely will not help affordable housing. No FDI is interested to come into an affordable housing project because the margins are so wafer thin. When we find it difficult to do it, where will we attract a FDI investor to come into a affordable housing with FDI? So I think that is not going to happen at all. It is totally a knee-jerk reaction.
Okay, but at least sentimentally the government is trying to boost up the rupee. I don't know whether just the talk will help, but change in SEZ policy, how quickly this has happened in the last couple of days, just within this week. Exports from zones now have grown by 31%. We have seen the figures. In fact, the only glimmer of or silver lining in all the data which came out in this Independence Week was the fact that exports have seen a little bit of pickup. Now, if you look at the norms the government is bringing to for multi-product SEZ, they've said minimum land requirement has been brought down from 1,000 acres to 500 hectares. Sorry, those are both hectare figures. Let me say that again. Multi-product SEZ minimum land requirement has been brought down from 1,000 hectares to 500 hectares. Now, for sector specific, it has been brought down to 50 hectares. They've also done away with minimum land requirement criteria for IT, ITES zones. Irfan Razak, what do you make of it? I mean, flip-flop is the best way to term what has happened with SEZs in this country.
Manisha, just before I get into this SEZ, one point I'd like to make about the contribution of the real estate industry to the economy itself.
Right, sir.
Today, the real estate industry employs something over around 8 million people, and it contributes almost 6.3% to the GDP. Now, this is a huge contribution. And this industry should actually be encouraged by the government, should be, the government should give it the red carpet treatment to see that in case, I will just say, you're talking about all the figures in the beginning of the show and we're talking about the economy going down. But just in case something goes wrong with the real estate and the development industry, it's going to be a disaster for the economy of this country. So what really needs to be done is a lot more thrust, a lot more push has to be given to encourage real estate development. It will keep the employment, and this employment is actually down to the grassroots levels because you're going to the laborer and actual guy who really needs the employment. And then it's by way of taxes, the government collects something like 45% by way of service tax, stamp duty and VAT, and this adds to a huge chunk of money the government gains from the activity that we do. It's a struggle, it's a strain for us to get one approval, it's a struggle for us to put up our developments, and then also it's to tie up the funding and the money that we require to do the project. At the end of the day, our margins are quite limited. We are not working with unlimited margins. And with all this, I believe there has to be a lot more push, a lot more encouragement to be given by the government. Now, coming back to SEZs, I don't think these little bit of few changes that have been done are going to affect in any way. SEZ itself is, according to me, a misnomer. Like IT SEZ, they've removed the cap on the area that is required, land area that's required. But at the same time, I mean, today you introduced the minimum alternate tax on SEZs. So that itself is sort of negates the very purpose of what you're doing an SEZ for, because ultimately anyway you're paying tax whichever way. So it's a no-win situation. Now, with the contradictions that are there, I believe something seriously has to be done. There was a conversation again on affordable housing. I have a different take on affordable housing. I believe that the housing, whichever target audience that you're addressing to, the price point, the ticket price should be affordable to that target audience. If you're hitting the mid-income or lower mid-income group, there's a certain price point that this group can buy at. Now, that is a complete reflection on what the interest rate is, what the salary savings that the buyer can have between the husband and the wife if two of them are working, and the surplus itself goes into buy an EMI. Today, if somebody borrows 100,000 rupees, the EMI is roughly around 1,000 rupees per month. So that is the indicator on how much, what type of unit value of a flat a buyer can buy. So these are the things, and actually on the ground, the affordable housing or the low income, mid income housing is the one that is maximum in demand, and that is what is doing well. And like rightly put by Anuj, the luxury sector is going to be slow, and it's going to be take a little time to revive.
All right, so very well made points, Mr. Razak. I'm going to just take a break here, but points that I'm going to come back to. Can we actually not just give a big fillip, a big attention to the real estate sector? America did it, US did it, and they've actually been able to lift the entire mood and the economy. If this sector in India employs 8 million people and also contributes to over 6% to the GDP, why don't you make the real estate sector the fillip that we're looking for to change the mood and the state of the economy? On our way back on this very interesting real estate debate on Independence Day. The state of the nation and the economy through the eyes of the real estate sector. Well, we've established that there's a lot that the government needs to do. Inaction has been the biggest problem, and it's actually led to housing being far more expensive for you and me as a consumer. If it would just get its act right on approvals, maybe we could have saved on the costs as well. Meanwhile, if it's going to employ a sector, 8 million people, and contribute to 6.3% of the GDP, Anuj Puri, can it not be the sector which could actually be the turning point for the economy as a whole if it just got its due attention?
Absolutely, Manisha. I have no doubt in my mind that it can be a big sector and it can be a big turning point for the Indian economy as a whole. I don't know whether it is the perception of this sector being a bad sector and the transparency in the sector not being very high, as a result of which the government does not want to take it on a priority, or they think is that it is a very capitalist sector in its nature, and hence if they were to do anything favorable to this sector, they would be seen as a very capitalist economy, and that restricts them from doing any meaningful adjustment. So before I get into that, one point that I do want to make is, which is what Mr. Razak made it on the FDI. Clearly, Manisha, FDI is not interested in Indian real estate. It is a myth that they are interested in Indian real estate. They do not understand how do we get approvals, how do we buy land here, what goes on in being able to buy the land and get in the approvals. They have got all FCPAs sitting back in the US. The Indian rupee continues to take a hit. They have no idea of the construction. They are not able to understand the developer risk. They are not able to hedge the Indian rupee. So clearly, I don't think, relaxing and saying is that now it is going to be no more 500,000 square feet and it's going to be 250,000 square feet. You're going to find FDI come into this country. Not at all. We're not finding any inquiries for FDI to come into the construction activity. What they are looking at is to be able to buy completed office assets. And that the government is not liberalizing it. So where they are keen to do it is that we want minimum risk, we want the tenants in it, we want no approval, no construction risk, we want everything to be bought over a yield. That the government is very hesitant to open the market, and that's where you're going to find the challenge of FDI not coming into the country and playing it. And the last point on that is not many FDI have had success stories. FDI has been here since 2007. I think there will be no more than 5 or 6 out of 60 or 70 who came into India who would be a success story here. So it's not that they are being able to export success stories back into the international markets to say that we're going to get a ton of money into India because we made a lot of money.
So Pranav, that's the whole point. I mean, you're not changing the investment climate, you're just easing up some norms and thinking that money will flow in.
I want to give you a consumer angle for real estate. Everybody here will give a developer angle. In India, every individual who's even not a developer talks about his wealth by the house or by the property he owns.
Absolutely. It's so easy in India to actually sell.
So the more the government helps the sector grow, the more it will grow the wealth of the people. And all developers sitting here, we are all responsible for making crore patis in this country. Because we sell properties at price X, and some of the properties we have sold in Gurgaon, we know there must be at least 10,000 people who've all become crororepatis over the last few years. So I think the government must realize this fact that we are creating wealth for individuals. We are creating wealth for people. Sometimes I meet people who don't know me, they'll come to me and
that's why they call you capitalist. That's what Anuj is just saying. That's why you're capitalist and you don't deserve any attention.
But we deserve attention because we are creating wealth for the people. We are actually doing a job where the people create wealth. In fact, some of the small towns in India, the only thing people discuss where there is no industry and there's no economic activity, they measure their wealth by the real estate they own.
I think you have a point, Mr. Raheja. If you can quickly have the last word from you.
See, this particular sector, you give us respect, you give us transparency. Reason is we don't get investments, we don't get respect, we don't get handholding. A sector is not able to grow because government itself does not want to give you transparency. We are fighting for it. As president of NAREDCO, we have been fighting for it since last 3-4 years now.
Okay.
Please allow us to put all these systems online so that we can start construction immediately.
Fair enough. So we've taken that point that, this is the biggest problem that the developers are facing. Chitu Babu, one final word from you. If you were to ask the government for one change, for one wish on your list, what would it be?
See, on this Independence Day, we would definitely ask for nothing more than a respect to this industry, which is actually contributing so much to the economy and also creating job opportunities for millions and millions of people and creating wealth, as he rightly said, creating wealth for a common man. See, this industry has developed, improved, and it is performing today. It is definitely seen as a performing industry, and it is really adding a lot of value to the Indian economy.
Mr. Mufatraj, just one thing that you would want from the government, in one line, sir.
To unshackle the industry.
To unshackle the industry,
of course. All the approvals which is required. On an Independence Day, let's get this industry a little more independence and unshackle it from all the permissions which is needed.
Very well put, sir. Very well put. Irfan Razak, on your list, top wish.
See, I mean, we can have any wish, but I wish that the government recognizes us and calls us across the table, has a discussion, understands our pain, and we work together, including infrastructure, and see how we can make our cities more livable and how we can grow our country and contribute more positively.
Pranav Ansal.
I think independence from red tapeism and industry status.
Industry status. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that let's sit across the table, cut down on the red tape, the approval processes are just crazy for the industry, and let's just work together, because you can actually build a remarkable nation if you just gave a little more respect and attention to real estate sector, and probably also ensure that those 1.2 billion people get a little closer to having a roof over their heads. Well, we've spoken about a lot of negative things, a lot of positive things, but things don't look so bad, at least from the real estate sector. Without the attention, the sector has been doing well, the industry has been doing well, and hopefully it will ride through the period that we are all going to go through, a rough period in the next 6 months or 8 months till we have a mandate on the next or from the next elections. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me today on this very special debate, the state of the nation and economy from the eyes of the real estate sector. It's easy for us to forget sometimes the good that we have succeeded very well in building a nation and a strong democratic institution over the last 66 years. That's the reason why we can all sit here and bash the government, isn't it? That's it. That's a liberal, democratic and inclusive constitution that we have, which enables us to do so. Poverty levels have declined, education levels along with opportunities have risen. What we have failed to do is to capitalize on that buzzword which we all had started to relish and feel proud of, India, the next economic superpower. Well, we did have that going for us not so long ago. Our policymakers must give it back to us with the help of the industry. On that hopeful note, it's a sign-off from the property team at NDTV. We wish you all a peaceful and harmonious special day. We leave you with some more top voices of India's real estate sector and what they wish for on this Independence Day. Jai Hind.
We need to revisit. Do we really want to continue with this policy or the set of policies? where the consequence is that it's being pro-rich, pro-bungalow, pro-farmhouse, and anti-small flats and anti-middle class and emerging classes. So at every detail, these policies need to be revisited, not just in one, and we need to come back to at least a level playing field, if not a kind of an encouragement to the affordable housing sector.
Why not create a committee, maybe under FM, which deals with investment between 200 crore to 1000 crore? Now I am sure many hundreds of real estate projects will be covered under this, and these projects which are stuck will see light of the day and will move, which will move the economy.
I think we need to increase the supply side, and I don't think anything is happening on increasing the supply side, say where new industries or new infrastructure is getting created, where banks are funding more money aggressively at a lower rate so that people come forward and set up a new plant and machinery. I personally feel that area something need to be done.
I feel in the recent past a lot of money has gone out of the country because investor confidence is very low. So I think that investor confidence needs to be, we need to win back investor confidence. And that can happen only if all these policies are implemented and actually businesses start making profits. Because only when you make profits, investors actually, know that yes, there are businesses making profits and we can invest in these businesses. Only then money will come back inside. Right now what is happening is people feel money is actually invested in India, but we're not able to see returns and we're not able to take the money back.
I'm very fed up with this approval system, whether a building permission approval, whether environment clearances, whether high-rise committee clearances, and so on. My first appeal to the government would be, if they allow the architects to approve the building plan, same like chartered accountant signs the balance sheet and get the assessment order from the income tax department, or we get the funding from the bank. So the first foremost is the architect's approval is very, very necessary. That's the first point. Secondly, we should go away with the limit of the FSI, because ultimately we are restricting the development potential of the land.
We have to aim at growing high and look at avenues to see how can we grow. I think that's the most important. If we lose this potential that we have, then I don't know when we will get these opportunities. So never leave an opportunity. Ensure that the growth takes place at the pace at which we envisage it, or much more than that, because the potential that India has, no other country has.